Secondary Counselor here at Parkway Central High School. We are excited to join together with the other high schools in Parkway tonight to host a Financial Aid 101 evening to help our families learn as much as possible about the process of financial aid. And this is really part one in a series of two. So later in December, we will have St. Louis University here again to really dive into the actual FAFSA application. And that will be really for senior families, but learning about financial aid can happen at any point, right? So whether you are a freshman family just getting started and trying to think and plan for college, or you are in the midst of it right now this year, there is learning for all of us. So as I mentioned before, my name is Nana Prang. I am at Parkway Central. Tonight also joining us is Katie Meyer. She's doing the handouts at the door. She is the post-secondary counselor from Parkway North. Chris Lorenz is up here to my left from Parkway West. And then Robin Suk is from Parkway South. They actually hosted a separate financial aid night. She had planned that prior to this event being organized, so she invited all of the South families who were unable to attend her event, but she wasn't able to join us this evening. So as we share information tonight, I just wanted to take a few moments to talk about where you can find additional resources. All of our counseling websites at each of our high schools will have financial aid pages, links to the information that we're sharing this evening. So as you see the hyperlinks for the Missouri Source, that is a resource that's basically a booklet that the Missouri Department of Higher Ed prepares for families, and you can click on that link on all of our sites and be able to access that resource. And then there is a new site by the MOCAN, which is the Missouri College and Career Attainment Network, called mofafsa.org, and that has a lot of great resources for families as well. Naviance is a college platform that is used by all four of the high schools, and that's where we will post all of the scholarships that we are aware of. So as we hear this evening, financial aid, a component of that is searching for scholarships, and although your application for admission to the colleges usually connects you to many scholarship opportunities, there are external scholarships from whether it's local organizations, our individual school PTOs, the databases that we have access to that we advertise. You will be able to find that in Naviance. Your students all have access to Naviance, and you can have a parent account as well to be able to go in and see those resources. And then, of course, the college financial aid offices, which we are so happy to partner with. They are available for families and do community outreach just like this evening, pushing into the high schools, connecting with families, regardless of whether or not your child is considering St. Louis University. They are a knowledgeable, accessible resource for you. So as I mentioned, the counseling sites, I just wanted to show you that to access all of those, you're going to go to your high school's home page, so the main website for your high school, and then the banner across the top, right in the middle, you're gonna find a link that says counseling. So for each of us, you click on that counseling site, and as you can see, I've just highlighted that each counseling page has a financial aid or a financial aid and scholarship link to help you connect with that information. And then the scholarships in Naviance, those are going to be in the section under colleges, scholarships, and money. So there is a scholarship search section where we are manually entering all of the scholarships that we've been asked to advertise. We also link to 2 different databases within our scholarship, whether it's on our counseling website or inside of Naviance. One is called My Scholarship Central, which is a database specifically for St. Louis area students. So it's not a national database, it's local organizations, companies that are seeking to connect funding opportunities to students in the St. Louis area. And then Going Merry is a national database that organizes things in a way that can be very helpful for students. It might be, okay, we're in October, here are all the scholarships due in October. Now here are all the scholarships due in November. So it helps kind of keep students on track and pacing through. And they're going to have scholarships really more so for students in any grade level versus some of the other databases might be for seniors only, okay? If you do not have your parent Naviance account, if this is the first time you've ever heard of Naviance, and you want to be able to access those things, you can connect with your high school's post-secondary counselor, and we will click a button, activate your account, and you can dive in. So this is just a screenshot of Naviance once you log in. As I mentioned, you click on colleges, and then there's an entire section called Scholarships and Money. So that scholarship search is where we're entering those individual scholarship opportunities. There's a national scholarship search that has 3.5 million scholarships available, and you can put in some identifying information and it will filter those scholarships and give you a reasonable amount of results, usually 40 or so that you match with, and then you can assess whether or not you are going to pursue those. And then finally, I like to just mention some specific things about scholarships. Are there scams out there? Unfortunately, yes. However, that's not the intent and the mission of a scholarship. You should not be providing bank or credit card information to apply for a scholarship. If anything seems a little bit fishy, a good tip is to simply Google or search the Better Business Bureau or the Federal Trade Commission to see if it's a reputable organization before submitting that application. And finally, there is no season of scholarships. There are potentially seasons of applying to college, but scholarships are all the time. There are scholarships in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and you don't stop. When you get to college, you're applying for scholarships your freshman year, your sophomore year, your junior year, your senior year. So it's really important to just have that be something that's consistently on your radar. And for the senior families, it's a lot right now. Applications are heavy right now, and a lot of students are like, I can't even think about scholarships. But get into that, don't forget about it, and really continue pushing through, even once you get to that institution. And then that last resource that I had mentioned was the financial aid offices. They are so generous with their time, their resources, their information that they know. Reach out to them if you have questions about things. If you have unique circumstances within your family that really an application for financial aid is not going to explain, it's having those conversations with them. If you go through the process of applying for financial aid, sometimes they ask for additional information or verification of things, and it's just very important that you act and respond to those kinds of things. If anything changes with the status of your family's financial needs, someone is laid off, there is a death in the family, those things are communicated then with financial aid offices, and if possible, adjustments can be made. Seek out the funding that's available at the institutions. As I mentioned, often the application for admission covers many of those automatic scholarships that you would qualify for, but they may have additional competitive scholarships or scholarships within specific departments. So making sure that you are exhausting all of those resources as well. So our featured speaker, and why you're really here, not to hear me, we are very thankful that St. Louis University provides community outreach, and we have Erin Gallagher. She is a financial coordinator from St. Louis University. As I mentioned before, SLU is a wonderful resource for our community, our families here in Parkway, and annually they pour into our buildings and provide resources for families. So I'm going to turn my clicker and microphone over to Erin, and she will take it away from here.
Awesome. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Erin Gallagher, and as Nana mentioned, I am a financial aid coordinator at St. Louis University. I do have a background in admission, so if there's any general questions about the college application process, I can also answer those this evening. But tonight we're mostly going to focus on Financial Aid 101, just to kind of give you a quick overview of what to expect throughout your student's senior year in regards to anything financial aid related. So for the agenda for tonight, we're going to focus on different types of financial aid, how to apply for that aid, a brief FAFSA overview, and then what those financial aid offers and that timeline is going to look for your student's senior year. For types of financial aid, we have two main categories, gift aid and self-help. Gift aid is what you and your student are primarily going to want to be looking at in order to help them go to college. Those will be scholarships and grants. It's free money, so gift aid, you do not have to pay any of that back. With scholarships, that'll primarily be those merit-based scholarships, any talent-based scholarships, such as being in the chorus or band or theater group at the collegiate level, and then any athletic aid if your student is planning on being a student athlete. Then going into grants, this is often need-based aid from institutions or the federal government or state governments. That will be determined by filling out the FAFSA. So if you are looking to get any need-based aid, you will need to complete the FAFSA, as most institutions require that before they are able to award any need-based aid internally, in addition to being eligible for any of that federal or state aid. Going into self-help aid, that would be listed as either a loan or an employment opportunity. This is money that you would either have to earn by doing an employment and having a job on campus, such as federal work study, or a non-federal work study job on campus, or loans, which means that you would need to pay back that most likely after the student graduates. That can be the federal direct student loans, the Parent Plus loan, which is a loan in the parent's name, or any private or alternative loans. So how do I apply for all of this aid? By applying to the institution through the admission application, you can be eligible for that merit-based scholarship, which is usually determined by GPA or test scores. Some schools are test optional for admission, but may require test scores for scholarships, so you'll want to contact your student's admission counselor at each institution in order to determine what the best path is for them, whether they should submit that test score or not. Then there's the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. That will determine the federal student or federal aid eligibility, including the Pell Grant or the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant and those federal student loans. Lastly, there is the CSS profile. Some institutions will require this in order to fully determine the student's need-based eligibility. For an institutional level, these are typically more selective schools such as Harvard, and Harvard specifically guarantees students that 100% of their need-based, however much they need based on the FAFSA, will be granted by the institution. So they have students fill out the CSS profile in order to further confirm or verify that level of need. They will request a lot of additional information, and there is a fee for this application. So again, be talking to those admission counselors to make sure that see if this is something that you and your student should look into filling out for those specific schools. This is the FAFSA website, so it's studentaid.gov. This is where you'll go to create your FSA ID and then actually complete the FAFSA form. As you can see, there's a little, in the red box, it says complete the FAFSA here, but then right next to it, there is a bunch of resources that basically kind of walk you through how to fill out the FAFSA. As Nana mentioned, we will be doing a FAFSA overview in a couple of weeks. And so we will be coming back in order to kind of explain the FAFSA a little bit further and what that looks like for filling it out question by question. So definitely be on the lookout for that information if you have a senior and are looking to get more in depth with how to complete that form. So when should I apply for the FAFSA? If you have any older students who are currently in college or have recently gone through the college process, the FAFSA had opened in October. It is a little bit different this year as we are currently going through the FAFSA simplification process. So it is being delayed until a January 1st of 2024 release date. This will be completed for the first time in the student's senior year of high school and will need to be completed every single year that the student goes to college in order to be continually eligible for that need-based aid. It is oftentimes awarded on a first-come, first-served basis, so you'll want to complete it as soon as possible. And then schools individually will determine their priority deadlines. Most schools for previous years, it has been a deadline of February 1st. That is the date that I'm going to tell you today, as we do not have a specific deadline if we're going to push that back, given that the open date has been pushed back. So just plan to complete the FAFSA by February 1st. And then again, it must be completed every year that the student is enrolled in college. For next year, they're anticipating it going back to an October 1st opening date, so just be on the lookout from your students' colleges and information when they're a freshman to make sure that that's still the timeline that we're going with. So when filling out the FAFSA, you will use prior year tax and income information. So the 24-25 FAFSA will ask for information from 2022. Depending on personal circumstances, some students could be eligible to be considered independent and not required to report parent information. That is really specific cases such as being an orphan or a ward of the state or having children of their own. So very much a smaller pool of students. There will be a couple of questions that students will fill out in order to see if they're eligible to be considered independent, and it very much walks you through the process. So once you get to that part, you'll be able to determine whether parent information will be needed to be provided. Both the student and the parent will need to establish an FSA ID prior to deciding to fill out the FAFSA. It cannot be established and used in the same day, simply due to verification and getting you that contact information to fill out the FAFSA. So one thing that you can do now is you and your student can both go in and create that FSA ID and then make sure that you save those passwords and things so that when you go to complete it in January, you have it all set up and ready to go. Every question on the FAFSA will have a little hover question mark that you can see exactly what information is being asked. So definitely utilize that as you are completing the FAFSA. And then there are FAFSA practice tools on that website, or that screenshot that I just showed a few slides back. So as I mentioned, they are simplifying the FAFSA, so kind of walk through what that looks like for you all this year, especially if you've had other students go through the college application and FAFSA process, as it is a little bit different this year. It is being simplified for 2024 or 24-25 and on. And so previously, the expected family contribution, which is what is generated by the FAFSA, is now becoming the student aid index. That could only go as low as 0 in previous years, but now it can be determined to be negative 1,500. And then the direct data exchange is going to replace the IRS data retrieval tool. As you are filling out the form, it will determine if you and your family are eligible to complete the IRS data retrieval tool. And if it says that you are eligible, you must provide consent in order for your information from your taxes to be shared with the FAFSA. If you do not provide consent and are eligible to use this tool, you will not be eligible for federal or institutional aid, as your FAFSA will then be rejected. So definitely make sure that you are providing consent for that information so that you are eligible for as much need-based aid as possible. The calculation will be using student and parent income and assets, and some questions might be different or excluded from previous years. They're going from about 120 questions down to about 35, so it makes it a lot easier for families to fill out, but it definitely can look a little bit different for families who've filled it out previously. And then parents will be invited as contributors to complete their sections of the form. And that's what this section looks like. We were already provided a screenshot of this. So your student will need your name, your birthday, your social security number, and your email in order to have that all sent over for you, in order for you to be added as a contributor to complete your section of the FAFSA form. So going into those financial aid offers, it will list scholarships, grants, loans, work opportunities, etc. based on the FAFSA. This will vary from school to school. So some schools, when I was a freshman or applying as a senior going into my freshman year, I was eligible for work study at some schools and not eligible for work study at other schools. So not every offer will look the same, as they all have different things that make up their financial aid offers. It will be sent out by schools after students are admitted and the FAFSA is received. So again, with everything being pushed back a few months, I would anticipate offers to be available in March or April of your student's senior year. Kind of explaining what's going to be on that financial aid offer, there is a difference between direct costs and cost of attendance. Direct costs are billed costs that are associated with attendance, such as tuition, fees, and housing and meals for students who will be living on campus. Cost of attendance is that direct cost plus general cost of living for that area, such as including those books and supplies for that school, transportation, personal expenses, and other miscellaneous fees. So for example, when your student is living at home, any additional like snacks or groceries, any toiletries, things like that, that can all be factored into that cost of attendance, as it's things that they do use and need on a daily or weekly basis that you aren't necessarily providing for anymore because they are no longer living at home, but in fact living in a college dorm, things like that. So to kind of go through this slide to explain how those financial aid offers are going to be generated, each school sets its own cost of attendance. As it says here, it is variable. So we'll say 1 is a private institution, 2 is a state school, and 3 is a community college. Then you will have your student aid index, which is the same number across all schools, which will then be subtracted from that cost of attendance to generate what is considered need or remaining need. That's not necessarily the need that you are able to provide for a college expenses or college education, but what the schools are going to be looking at to determine what could go into your financial aid offer with those scholarships, grants, loans, etc. So, I thought I skipped a slide. So one of the things that you could be eligible for based on those financial aid offers are your federal direct student loans. By filling out the FAFSA, students are automatically eligible for these student loans, but they are in no way required to take them out, just something that is available to go towards their college expenses. It will be up to $5,500 of direct unsubsidized loans their freshman year, and will increase to $6,500 sophomore year, and then $7,500 for junior and senior year. Depending on their need, based on that previous slide, they could be eligible for unsubsidized loans of up to $3,500 of that $5,500. The unsubsidized means that it will accrue interest while they are in school, and the subsidized loans means that it will not accrue interest while they are in school. This previous year, they had interest rates of 5.5%. They did not, all of these federal direct loans will not need to be repaid until 6 months after graduation or falling below half-time status. And then, as you can see, the future amounts do increase year to year. Based on that grade level eligibility, it is based on the credit hours that your student has each year. So if your student is in any AP courses, dual enrollment, things like that, they could be eligible for those higher borrowing limits earlier on based on credit hours. And then also here, if your student is considered independent, they do also have those higher borrowing limits, simply because it is determining that they are not having any parental support. For outside scholarships and saving plans, most institutions will take outside scholarships. Those resources that Nana mentioned are great places to start. And then college savings plans, highly recommend you work with your provider if you have a 529 plan already to determine whether those funds should go directly to the school or if it will pass through you first. One thing to be careful of, and why you should talk to your 529 provider, is to make sure that if it does pass through you and then to the school, that you are following all the proper procedures, as you do not want that to be counted as income and then be taxed on it. Here are a list of some private scholarship search engines. The biggest piece of advice that we can give you and your student is to start small or start local, because there will likely be a smaller pool of applicants and a higher likelihood that your student will actually be awarded those scholarships. Everybody wants to be in the Dr. Pepper, throw a football at the halftime show, etc., in order to get that scholarship, but everybody in the nation is applying for that. If you go through your church or your school or another organization that you're a part of, there's definitely a smaller applicant pool than the entire high school senior class of the US. So then calculating that remaining balance, this seems pretty intuitive. You have those costs minus any aid that you received equals your remaining balance. Did everybody get a photo of that? I can go back. I saw some phones go up, so I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to. Okay. So you can pay that out of pocket. You can do a Parent Plus loan or a private student loan. With paying out of pocket, most institutions offer at least one type of payment plan, and most of those are 5 payments per semester, 10 payments per year, and then those college savings plans we mentioned. And then going into the Parent Plus loan, this has a little bit of a better breakdown of those other loan options. The Parent Plus loan is an educational loan in the parent's name for the student's education. The interest rate for this current year of 23-24 was 8.05%. There was an origination fee of 4.228. The loan will start to be repaid 60 days after full disbursement. So if you get a loan for the whole year, it'll be dispersed in August and January, so repayment will begin in March. You can borrow up to the full cost of attendance minus any aid received, and then they will not need a cosigner for that. If the parent is denied for any reason, then the student is eligible and to be awarded an additional $4,000 in an unsubsidized loan. For private or alternative loans, that'll be in the student's name. Interest rates will be variable. Repayment will begin within 6 months after graduation or falling below half-time status. Can borrow up to the cost of attendance minus any other aid received. Most students will need a cosigner. And then this loan is also a credit-based loan. If you and your student are considering taking out loans to pay for their college education, I highly recommend that you shop around and apply for a couple of different loans to see what different interest rates options you could get. My family applied for the Parent Plus loan and then a couple of different private or alternative loans. And because my dad had really great credit, we had a lower interest rate with the private loans versus the Parent Plus loan, just because the Parent Plus loan is set by the federal government and is the same for everybody, whereas the private or alternative is based on credit. So definitely something to consider when looking at loans, but definitely prioritize getting that gift aid, scholarships, any grants, things like that as your first source of financing your college education. Then looking into repayment options, this compares the 3 different types of loans we've gone over this evening. of the federal direct student loan, the federal Parent Plus loan, and then those private student loans with those set interest rates from the federal government, and then that private student loan. Ooh. Okay, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to look at this one over here. With the private student loans, we're doing an estimated variable rate of 10%. All have a 10-year repayment period, and then this is the monthly repayment anticipated after the student graduates or when the repayment starts. So as you can see, it's 108 per 10,000 borrowed, 122 per 10,000 borrowed, or 132 per 10,000 borrowed. And that's only per 10,000. So if you're looking at taking out a $40,000 loan for freshman year, you need to anticipate taking out a $40,000 loan for sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. Or if you're looking at taking out $10,000 each year, that's $40,000 overall. That's still about a $500, $600 loan repayment once your student graduates each month. So something to take in mind, that when you're taking out loans, you're like, oh, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. But then it's the same amount, if not a little bit more, every year with interest rates increasing and things like that. So a timeline for the senior year, August to December, applying to different colleges, going on college visits, December creating those FSA IDs and preparing to file the FAFSA form. January is when the FAFSA is when we're anticipating it to be released and fully available. And then February, March, April, we'll be receiving those financial aid offers and comparing different options across the schools. May 1st is the college decision day. So that's when you and your student need to have decided where you're going and to submit that deposit and accept any of those financial aid offers. Over the summer, you'll want to make a plan to cover the remaining balance, apply for any loans, complete the master promissory note and loan entrance counseling, and then July and August, registering for those classes, finalizing payment arrangements, and moving in. The biggest piece of advice I can give families for this time of year right now is to have an honest conversation with your student about how you are financing a college education, whether that is the parent's sole responsibility, the student's sole responsibility, a mix of both, whether that's you're looking to have it all covered by scholarships, take out loans, 529 plans, things like that. That was a lot of information very, very quickly, and a lot of information that can be hard to process all at once. So I believe everyone has a handout that kind of does a quick little summary of what this presentation was. I believe it will be available after tonight, and then it's also available on our SLU website as well. Any questions for the group? Yes. So work study is not something that comes straight off of your student's remaining balance. It's something that they earn as they work. So as your student, I think the max right now is $2,000 per semester. So if they're working 10 hours a week at, we'll say $10 an hour, and if they've worked 3 or 4 weeks in a row, that's $400. We're gonna just disregard taxes. But so $400, that's out of the $2,000 that they can have for that full semester. If they just quit their job and stop working, then they're not necessarily losing out on any money because it hasn't been paid out to them yet. They're just not going to receive any more money to go towards whatever expenses.
They're not an obligation.
No, ma'am, no. Yes.
Where do you find the FAFSA practice tools?
They're on studentaid.gov, which is also where you will file the FAFSA. Yes.
You might have covered this, and I apologize. Is FAFSA required period, or only if you're going for federal aid? Like if you're doing a private scholarship, will they ask about FAFSA?
If you want any need-based aid, you will need to file the FAFSA, because that's how institutions determine any institutional grants or scholarships.
Not necessarily federal government money. It could be from the institution, but it's got to be based on need, not GPA.
Correct. So based on applying to schools, most schools you'll be automatically eligible for a merit-based scholarship, but if you want anything beyond that merit-based scholarship, you'll want to file the FAFSA.
I would also recommend just filling it out anyway, even if you're just looking at merit-based scholarships, because I've seen outside scholarships before that just want a completed FAFSA. Like, they don't care what the number on it is, they just want you to have completed it. And for most families, it's not that hard to do, so I would just, like everyone here, I would just give it a shot, because there's not really a downside to having to complete it.
Yes, ma'am.
The student aid index, say yours is $10,000 expected, what it would pay. Is that after loans are considered? Or do they say, okay, you know, $4,000 loan also, but then out of pocket this year, you're expected to take $10,000? Or do they not take loans into consideration?
So the question was if loans were taken into consideration prior to the student aid index calculation. Is that right?
Yeah, like if yours is $10,000, they say, well, you can go get a $4,000 loan, so you're really expecting to pay more. But,
So this, you're not, I'm trying to think how to word this. The student aid index is generated by the FAFSA and then used by schools to create financial aid offers. It's not, that number is not generated with you taking out loans in mind. The financial aid offers could include those loans as part of their financial aid offer, so you'll want to read through it pretty clear, like distinctively line by line, to see if schools are saying, oh, you're being given $40,000 in your financial aid offer, but $4,000 of that could be loans. Whereas other schools will be like, you've been given $40,000 of gift aid, and then there's a separate section of that loans that could also go towards affording your college education. Does that make sense?
Well, and I would say, I visited Parkway a couple weeks ago, and their financial aid officer that spoke was pretty clear about like how they present their financial aid package to students or they accept, because it does get a little money when their package of money includes this stuff that you're having to repay back, versus we're giving you this money and you're gonna have to take loans for this other money, right?
Okay,
And so it depends on the college on how the financial aid department, I think, communicates their packages. Some are more clear than others, or some like to blend the two, and it's a little deceiving, like, it's not all free money here.
yeah,
You
so
know,
it's like, this
right.
is need-based, this is,
Yeah.
this is what you can get a loan for, and this is like what your GPA will get you, and
It's very much school by school.
see what you get.
Exactly, and just read everything pretty definitively and clearly. Yes, sir.
So regarding the 529 and the scholarship. So if I have a 529, which one will be prioritized? Scholarship amount or 529? Like if I have 529 of $1,000, let's say, right? And the student is eligible for the scholarship of let's say $600. So then, so which one, the 529 will be considered first?
You'll want to use any scholarship money prior to using 529 money. So if your student receives scholarships, you'll want that to go before you take any money out of the 529 to pay your remaining balance.
So it was that, is that money can be transferred between the siblings, or the 529 money can be transferred between the siblings?
So the question is whether 529 funding can be transferred between siblings. That is solely based on the 529 providers' stipulations of those plans. Some plans will let you do that if the one student is no longer needs those funds or is not going to college. Others are very clear that it has to go towards that specific student who it was set up for. Yes.
And sorry if you touched base on this. Can you talk about like SAP or like keeping financial aid once a student is in college?
Yes, so the question was, how do students keep their financial aid once in school? Every school has it set up a little bit differently, but basically the understanding is that the student will meet certain like merit-based criteria. So at SLU, for example, you have to keep a 2.0 GPA in order to maintain any merit-based awards. And then a part of keeping any of that financial need or need-based aid is that you continue to file the FAFSA. Every school has it set up a little bit differently. So ours, we keep it very standard of keeping a 2.0 and continuing to file the FAFSA. But other than that, you're pretty much good to go. You'll want to check in with those admission counselors at each school to see what the stipulations are for that, those, whether it's that merit aid or that need-based aid. But typically there's a certain GPA cutoff that they'll want you to maintain. Yes. The question was whether merit-based would be renewed every year. That is pretty much the standard across our functions. But again, you'll want to check on that just to be sure. For SLU, we renew it up to 10 semesters. So in case your student needs an extra semester or two, given any global pandemics or things like that occur, we do guarantee an extra year of that merit-based aid.
What's your stipulation? Is there like a GPA requirement, like minimum, to maintain your merit-based money?
A 2.0, yeah. Yes, sir.
Now, this was several years ago, but when I was in school, Missouri offered something called the Bright Flight Scholarship. Do they still offer something similar to that if you attend a Missouri school?
Yes, Bright Flight is still offered for students. I don't know much about Bright Flight. Isabel, would you know more? Isabel is my coworker. She came from Bayless High School, and so now she works in our financial aid department and is very.
Still exists. You need, I believe it's 32 on the ACT or something close to that. I'm not
It's
sure.
a 32, but they now super sport.
Okay.
Yeah, totally still exists.
Okay. And it's called Bright Flight.
And it's still called Parkway.
Is that directly something that colleges automatically, like if you send in your super score ACT, do colleges automatically, or is that a separate application? Or to get the Bright Flight?
It's not a separate application, but your score has to be sent to the Missouri Department of Higher Ed. So like that happens when you take the ACT. And then if you send your score to a school in Missouri, then that initiates the right flight.
College.
Last year was 3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to do anything extra to get Bright Flight. The only way that it's not automatic is sometimes they have multiple cutoffs. So there's one cutoff that's like the higher cutoff, that's you're guaranteed to get it, and then there's a second cutoff that's a little lower, that's like if you have some money, maybe you'll get it. And so last year they were able to get money to the lower cutoff as well. It was less money, but it was still a good thing. That's the only way that it's not automatic. But either way, like, the student doesn't have to do anything besides get that requirement.
Yes, ma'am. They could be eligible for more scholarships just through the ROTC program, so they'll want to reach out to the school's program specifically. I know that SLU has the Air Force and they have a partnership for the Army ROTC, and those students do receive additional scholarships from the Air Force and the Army. Yes, ma'am. No. So the question was whether you should file the FAFSA as it is based on income and what those income levels would be for eligibility. So for the federal government, they're in the process of redoing simplifying the FAFSA. So all of those things are currently changing a little bit for how they generate the student aid index. Us on the higher education side are still waiting to see what exactly that is going to look like, as they are still putting it together. It'll be ready by January 1st, and then that's when families will be able to file the FAFSA. Essentially, even if you are not eligible for federal aid, you could be eligible for institutional aid, such as scholarships or grants that are awarded by each school individually. Basically, Isabel was saying that you should file the FAFSA just to see what you're eligible for, because gift aid, those scholarships and grants, it's free money that you don't have to pay back. And there's no requirements or anything to take out the federal aid. If you want to take out the loans or anything, you don't have to do that. You can simply accept any grants and scholarships that you receive and then fund your education through whatever other means you have. So that's why we recommend everyone file the FAFSA, because if you don't, then you could be leaving free money on the table.
Even if you're from a higher income family, you still could be leaving.
Yes, ma'am.
So once you apply to the school and they give you your financial aid package, can you accept only part of that?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what you were saying, that they give you a package that includes loans, and you're not interested in that because you don't have to pay back. You can only take certain parts.
Yes. So the question is, if you receive a financial aid offer that has scholarships and loans in it, and you only want to take the scholarships, you can decline the loans. You can also decline the scholarships if you want. I would not recommend that, but you don't have to take the full offer, as each part of the offer you can accept or decline individually. Yes, ma'am.
The FAFSA practice tool that's out there, does that have all the questions that are going to be asked on actual tests?
Yes and no. So the FAFSA practice tool that is currently out there is for the 23-24 FAFSA, which is what's currently available. The 24-25 FAFSA will have significantly less questions. So we are assuming that all of the questions that will be on the FAFSA have been previously on the FAFSA. They're just taking out a lot of the questions, or they are wording them just a little bit differently, but it is asking the same information. They've just already determined what they use to create that student aid index, or previously known as the expected family contribution, so that they no longer need to ask the 120 questions. They only need to ask the 35. The practice tools are just on the main website. You do not need to have an account prior to doing that, but I do recommend you set up your FSA ID so that when you are ready to actually complete the 24-25 FAFSA, you're already set and good to go.
Based on citizenship status and financial aid eligibility?
Yes, so with citizenship status and financial aid eligibility, it will be dependent on what your student citizenship status is. Say that your student was born here in the US and has a social security number, but the parents do not have social security numbers. They will most likely, if they have any other form of identification that they use to file their taxes, then they will use that. The parents will use that to set up their FSA IDs. If they do not have another identification number that they use to file taxes, then you will likely need to file a paper FAFSA. So then you would print off the FAFSA and then send it into the federal government, as your student would still be eligible for federal aid, even if the parents do not have any federal identification numbers. If your student is an international student, they are not eligible to file the FAFSA. Yes, but could be eligible for the CSS profile, as that is more on an institution-based or on an institution basis. Yes, sir.
With the federal parent plus loan and private loan, what's typically the better route to go
Yeah, so private loans are taken out in the student's name. The Parent Plus loan is taken out in the parent name and is a federal loan. So with that, that means that the federal interest rate is set for that loan for everyone, whereas the private or alternative loan, even though it's in the student's name, that interest rate will vary from student to student, likely based on the student and their cosigner's credit.
So is the best course to kind of look at both?
I would recommend you look at both, just because the interest rates could most definitely will vary between the couple of different options that you can look at. And in my case, it was better for me to take out the loans in my name with my dad as a cosigner, because the interest rates ended up being lower, which means I was paying less over time.
I know now, like the basic federal student loans, they have all the income-based repayment plan. Do the private loans ever do anything like that, or is it pretty much this is our deal?
That very much depends on the loan lender. So some private loans will let you do like refinancing and can do those income-driven repayment options, but others are like, this is what you signed up for. So something to also research when you're looking into those different loan options. Yes, sir.
Is there, like on the student aid website, is there like something for you ready to do the FAFSA, like what documents to have handy, like nearby, so you're not having to like go back and forth?
Yes. So if you are, the question was, what documents do you need to have to fill out the FAFSA? If you are able to file or to use the direct data exchange, then that'll pull your taxes from 2022 via the IRS directly. And then you most likely won't need to change any information from that if your financial situation is pretty much the same as how you filed it. But if you do need to input your information for any reason, you'll want your taxes from 2022 and most likely any W-2s from that year as well. But I think that's pretty much all they would need to file the FAFSA. Yeah, I think there's not much other documentation that would be required. As Nana mentioned, there might be some verification later on, but the schools will be very specific in what exactly they're looking for that you would need to provide. Yes, sir. Yeah, so how is the student aid index calculated? It's using both parent and student income and asset information. Yes, so 529s are included in the asset information. Yes, ma'am. Yes, so the 24-25 FAFSA will use information from 2022. Okay, awesome. If anybody has any more questions, Isabel and I will be available at the front, but I don't want to keep all y'all from the rest of your evening. So thank you so much, and I'll hand it back over to Nana.
Here is their contact information.
If you need us after today, we are definitely a resource that's available to the community. So even as you are talking to other schools, if you're not looking at SLU at all, we are definitely an option if you just kind of want to ask us some questions, run things by us, make sure you're not missing anything. So definitely take a photo of this slide on how to contact us, whether it's via phone, email, or even just visiting our office.
And it's true. So as I mentioned before, the financial aid offices really at all of the colleges are the gurus, right? You can ask us questions, and we do webinars, and we go to workshops, and we try to learn as much as possible. But this is what they do all day, every day. And they are very, very willing to have conversations. If any of you are considering applying to colleges with that early decision contract, making sure that you have done net price calculators, talked with financial aid offices, predicted what your financial aid package might look like, and have those conversations, have extenuating circumstance conversations with financial aid offices, really to get as much information as possible before you make those commitments, and ultimately for everyone, before you make that final decision about where you will attend, what's realistic for your family. And, I think we probably all have students who come rushing in and saying, well, this school gave me $20,000 and this school only gave me $5,000, but they're not looking at the starting cost and what the out-of-pocket actually still looks like. So it's really, as you try to compare financial aid letters and awards from every school, they all do package differently. And so it's looking at what is the actual out-of-pocket and what makes sense and what you can actually navigate realistically. So we do want to plug the upcoming events that we are all advertising as well. So if attending a college fair is something that you're maybe in the younger years of researching colleges and you want to learn more about schools, we had a Parkway college fair in September. If you missed that opportunity at Queenie Park, there is a national college fair, and guess who's hosting it? St. Louis University. So they host that every single year. It's on a Sunday afternoon from 1 to 4, October 29th. And we encourage families to register for that. You get a barcode, and then you can scan and talk with over, I don't know what the count is up to now, over 100 colleges that will be there. The website actually gives you a list of the schools who will be in attendance, so you can even preview that in advance and see if there's a specific school that maybe driving down to SLU is easier than getting on an airplane and flying to campus and connecting with someone. And then our FAFSA evening event, which is actual details on filing, that is December 13th. So even though Aaron said in a couple weeks, it's actually in a couple months. But we wanted to have it as close to when the FAFSA was going to be opening as possible. And initially they just told us sometime in December. So her mark of honor before January 1st, that's all really they've guaranteed. So it could be anytime in December, but that is back here at Central High, but instead of being here in the Commons, it will be in the theater. That's where we normally have our events, but we have a beautiful set design that's up for our fall play right now. So we have shifted to this space. So in the Parkway Central Theater, it will also, just like this evening, will be live streamed and recorded. So if you are unable to attend in person, you will be able to go back and access that as well. So thank you. Round of applause for Erin for joining us this evening, and Isabel for helping her out as well, and her gracious offer to answer individual questions. So our group time is up, but if you have questions, I'm going to power off the mic and stop the live stream, and we will hopefully see you at another event